Hi, welcome to Write More Light. My name is Sarah, and I am so happy to return in 2022 with Liv. Oh, I should have asked you, Mammone.
Mammone, yeah, you got it.
With one of my favorite humans I've met through writing. We met through Iowa City Poetry, so shout out to them. Liv is an editor and poet from Long Island, New York. So we're going coastal today. Her poetry has appeared in Word Gathering, Monstering, Wicked Banshee, the Medical Journal of Australia. What? We'll get back to that one, and other places. In 2017, she competed for Union Square Slam as the first disabled woman to be on a New York National Poetry Slam team. No big deal. She was also finalist in the Capturing Fire National Poetry Slam in DC, a Brooklyn Poets Fellow, and a Zoe Glossia Fellow.
Nailed it. Great.
I get so nervous when I forget to check how to say things. She also works as an editor. Thank you so much for being here, Liv. I am thrilled out of my brain to be able to finally sit down with you on the public stage.
Thank you, and thank you so much for understanding the rescheduling last time, and to your amazing listeners for understanding why at the last minute I had to be like, yikes, everything is I'm in trouble and I can't do this. So thank you for the patience of you and your beautiful audience, because that was a moment. We had a real moment. It was like, whoa, all of a sudden my life is kind of falling apart. No big deal, it's all fine, but we're here now and everything is now great. So I'm in an amazing headspace to come and talk to you, and I've been looking forward to this for 2 months.
My life is kind of falling apart.
I don't know what just happened, but it's okay. It's fine.
I tried to pause the live stream so that I could keep it on my screen, and I unmuted it. So sorry about that.
That's okay. There are 2 Armenians in here. It's going to get real loud, guys. You might want to adjust your headphones. Whatever volume you're normally listening to this at, you might want to lower it just a tad.
I want to argue, but it's true.
You can't even tell me I'm lying, though. Tell me I'm lying. I'm not wrong.
Well, so started a couple minutes late, and
yeah, we're operating on Mediterranean person time right now. Sorry.
And we're gonna talk fast. This is just how it's gonna go.
Yeah.
You've been warned, audience.
Yeah.
Okay,
you can slow it down to like 1.5 speed if at any point you sort of lose the track. It's taken me about a year of doing these kind of Zoom interviews to like stop using my NPR voice. It's like, okay, just talk like you normally talk. Why are you talking like Terry Gross? Like, what's happening?
I adopted an NPR voice for a reading once because someone told me to. Like it was like required for whatever reason.
No.
And I couldn't get out of it. Like now when I read, I like have a it's horrible.
I kind of hate that for that person who told you to do that. Like that, my initial gut reaction is like, that sucks. Don't like that at all.
Because so you're a performer, so you get this. Like part of reading is performing.
Yes.
And they were like, you need to slow down. Every word needs its time. And I'm like, but it doesn't. This sentence is supposed to be really fast.
Yeah, no, and you know, as somebody who does read very quickly and who is actively working to go to half speed, who's been told by a lot of my audiences, like, take it a little bit slower. There is a mixture between that and like your typical poetry reading voice, this cadence, and like there's a really interesting, like I can always tell when I'm at a reading and that person has not been trained in performing at all and who like doesn't have any sort of performance background, and I'm just like, I wish this was part of MFA programs. Like I've been saying this since my undergraduate days. I've been like, okay, we really need to make elocution and speech giving and performance part of poetry MFAs, in my opinion, just to make it more alive and more engaging for the audience. Because I came up in spoken word. I watched deaf poetry as a 13-year-old, and that was what really sort of got me into like poetry as a whole. So for me, poetry it cannot be separated from performance. But there is this other class of poet who I feel like a not as engaging performance is almost proof of the authenticity of the poet. Like if you're sitting there and you're like really not looking at your audience and you're just looking at the paper and you're giving sort of a monotone NPR voice performance. I think there is a class of poet that kind of views that as like being more authentic, like like it's as if the audience isn't there and they're not important and they're not a part of the process, which is one way of looking at things. Sure, I'm not gonna discount anybody, but that's just not the way that I learned how to do this. So like for me, voice and performance are a huge part of what we do, and I think that it could help not only poets but like people who are not interested in poetry to get more engaged in what poetry actually is. If we were like, hey, no, actually, this is kind of, it's got more in common with like acting or delivering a monologue than it does with, I don't know,
Yeah,
some dusty writer that you learned in ninth grade English. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, I mean, words story started spoken. I want to give a shout out to the Midwest Writing Center, which is who I am. Because when I was a teenager, when I was an intern at the writing center, we were taught to perform. That was part of our, and it still is part of our curriculum. So that's really dope. I love how we just like got into the meat of things. That was so dope. I'm gonna rewind for a second and say, for those who don't know what to expect today, we're gonna do this. I'm gonna hang out with Liv for a while. Liv's gonna hang out with me. Then I'm gonna give some updates on what's up at the Writing Center. Then we're gonna do a 5-minute free write, and then we're gonna bid you adieu. Now back to the meat and potatoes. Performance is important.
Yeah, but now that I've totally thrown off the mode of your episode right now, yeah, sorry.
Oh my God, no, see, that's the point, right? That's why I have a stellar guest, is because you're going to say relevant, awesome things that, you know, matter to the world of writing.
You're getting a really good idea of what I'm like at parties too. Like we were just talking off mic about how like I have forgotten how to be a person. I don't have the gift for small talk. I have always been like somebody who meets someone for the first time and is like, so what do you think about death? And people are just like, you okay? Like, or I'll just pop off about like, you know, somebody will mention to me what their favorite movie is, and I'll be like, oh, there's a really ableist portrayal in that particular film, and just immediately like alienate whoever it is that I'm talking to. It's like, it's amazing that I have any friends because I'm so serious like all the time.
Well, you have all the right ones, right?
I do have all the right ones. Yeah.
So that's a pretty good segue for my first question, which is I think that in order to have the conversations that the header sort of points to, we need first to talk about identity, which, I mean, if you ask me, all writing is about identity, so it's not really like I don't know, it's not really a weird thing to talk about, but people often treat it as though identity is irrelevant or superfluous maybe. So we're talking specifically about having multiple identities today, things that excite me about your writing, because I've read your writing. I've seen you read, not in any formal way, but I've seen you read, and you don't pull your punches when you write about life. And so we're talking about multiple identities, which I think all people have. I don't know, I'm like tiptoeing around like I didn't title this episode Queerness and Disability. So what I've heard you speak on, particularly in the classroom spaces that we've shared, is queerness and disability. I also know that you're Armenian, which is a highlight for me. And that's like, I mean, my queerness and my Armenianness are a big part of my identity. And, you know, as a whole grown adult, I learned that I was neurodivergent. I picked up chronic pain as an adult.
Yeah, love that. Love entering that kingdom that we all wish we could really get out of. It's really, yeah, it's great.
So in my life, you know, I've noticed people don't want to talk about those things. And I think that is why art is so powerful, for one reason. But I want to hear from you. I want to know how your identity figures into, you know, your paradigm, your worldview, and also how that affects your identity as a writer specifically.
Yeah, I mean, people who have actually heard me be interviewed before, I've probably told this story quite a bit, and are probably really tired of me telling the story. But it really, we often talk about this kind of journey as like this like nebulous thing of like we kind of don't know how we got from point A to point B. And I'm actually really lucky enough that I know there have been really, really specific instances in my actual personal life that have gotten me to this place poetically where I'm like, no, I'm gonna write about this, this being, you know, the multiple intersections of my identities pretty constantly and like never shut up about it. And when I first started writing poetry, up until a very late place in my career, up until sort of my graduate work for my MFA, I did not want to write about disability specifically. I didn't at the time know I was queer, so that was like a whole other thing that I hadn't picked. I didn't come out as queer until I was 24. Like I one day fell madly in love with a woman and was like, oh, I guess that's a thing we have to deal with now. Like there was no like long coming out narrative arc. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, guess that's a thing now. And then I like, you do that thing where you sort of look back over your life when you come out and you're like, oh shit, it's been there the whole time. Like it would, you know, like I definitely have always been queer, but I very much did not know I was queer until my late 20s. So that was like a whole thing that was very new. But specifically about disability, I went through this moment where one specific person would show up at all of my readings in undergrad, and she would always say the exact same thing to me. She would say, it's so amazing to see someone like you know, up on stage just doing their thing. And I was like, oh, I really want to be
Someone like
generous.
you.
Someone like me, which of course we know what that means,
What is
don't
the
we? That
elephant in the room here?
that
What are you
means that
afraid to
means a visibly
say?
disabled person, obviously. But I'm like, okay, I really want to be generous in my reading of this. Like, you don't want to totally be a cynic. And so after the fifth time she said it to me, I said, you know, thank you so much. You know, is there anything about my work that you're you know, engaging with? Like, what piece do you like? Like, what do you? And her face just like went completely blank, and she was just like, I don't know, just seeing you up there is just so great, and you're just so strong, and it's, and you know, I just seeing you. And she didn't use the word disability, she didn't say like you as a disabled person, but I was 18 and I was like, oh god, this is, nobody's listening, nobody's actually listening to anything that I'm saying. Cool, great, check. So at that point I was like, I'm not going to compound this by writing about my disability. I'm already getting up on stage as a disabled person. Like, I'm very easily clockable. You know, I'm on crutches. Like sometimes I trip over a wire on stage and fall. Like it's very easily identifiable. So I was like, I'm not going to give the satisfaction of people just only being able to see that and not being able to see anything else about my work. And so I went on for several years, very specifically not writing about that, and sort of, I had come from a fiction background, so I spent a lot of years just making shit up, just fully like writing poems that were not about me at all, and were just completely going through kind of a persona poem phase, which I'm very glad to be out of, because I think the persona poem is, uh, we could talk about it later, but the persona poem is kind of really going through a moment right now, and I'm really grateful that I'm not there anymore, because it would opt for some really tricky
I'm not
political
part of this
optics.
moment.
Yeah, it's really, it's going through a thing. You know, it's very tricky, I think, as a white person, to write a persona poem. I think that white people should really just kind of put the persona poem to the side for now, because I don't know, it's just really easy to not get that correct in many ways. So I'm really grateful that 18-year-old Liv kind of shifted her perspective. But then I got to grad school, and that was just not working. Like everything that I was writing was kind of like dead and lifeless, and was just not. And I think part of that was also kind of the way an MFA works, where you have to write like 3 poems a week, which for me, who's a very slow writer, was already kind of struggling with that. But everything was kind of dead. And Kamiko Han, one of my brilliant instructors at my MFA, shout out to Queens College, would ask of her students, so what? Which basically means like, okay, it's a good poem, so what? Like that, you know, and that seems like aggressive, but that was kind of her way of like, okay, but like why though? Like,
Yeah,
why did you
no.
write this? What's the point? Like,
Why did you write it? Why should I care? I don't,
who
I
gives
know.
it? Who cares? Like, it's technically proficient. Okay. Like, what? Okay, whatever. So I was at this place in my MFA where I was just really struggling, and like everything felt very dead and very disconnected. And I went to the dean of my department, Nicole Cooley, and she had a copy of the anthology Beauty is a Verb on her desk for me. And it was the first anthology of disabled poetics. So not only were there poems by disabled people, but there was an essay by each poet about how disability relates to their work. And so that was a huge thing for me, because it was like, oh my God, there are other disabled poets, which is like one of those things which, like, intellectually, obviously, you must know it.
Well, but if
But
there's
I
no
didn't know
visibility,
anybody.
then there's no, it's not real.
Right. It wasn't real for me. It was a very sort of like nebulous concept. It was like, okay, obviously there must be. I had met one or two people who were visibly disabled in the spoken word scene, but like, so but you don't like know. And then I was sort of mercenary, and I read through the whole book cover to cover and took notes, and then sort of started on my journey of like, okay, I'm gonna work with all these people. Like I then immediately like set out to sort of take classes with all of the people who had contributed to this anthology, and like writing them emails and writing reviews of their work. And it was a very sort of like, we talk about the creative process, sort of like this nebulous, like misty, like we don't really know how we're moving through it kind of thing. I was like, okay, here's how I just kind of went down the table of contents and was like, I'm going to contact all these people and just annoy them until somebody, I don't know, gives me a job or like wants to read my work or whatever. And I didn't realize how much I needed to be a part of a lineage. And that book was this huge talisman for like, okay, not and I realized like I was letting this imagined audience, this imagined able-bodied audience, dictate my work. I was not speaking from my own lived experience, because I was worried about how that was going to be interpreted by my largely able-bodied audience. And it had never occurred to me before that point that there was a disabled audience for my work. It was like, oh yeah, people actually really need to hear this. Like, this is important, because it was important to me reading these other people discussing their lived experience. I was like, oh no, there's really a contribution to be made here. And it's really important that I talk about what is actually going on with me and what it is actually like for me as an individual person to move through the world. So that was kind of how we got here, was sort of just me being like, this is important and I need to write about this. And now I can't stop writing about it. Now it's just like, oh, this is what I write about all the time. Okay. And I think that writers are often afraid to say that this is what I write about all the time. And we all have that couple of things that like really obsess us and really are the things that we want to be yelling about continuously. And I think writers are afraid to admit that we're all just kind of writing the same thing over and over and over again. I'm here to tell you it's fine. I'm here to tell you that it's okay.
I was looking on a bio recently and I was like, she writes about identity.
Yeah, but it's like you said, I think all poems are identity poems.
I said it about myself. Yeah.
I think that everything is about identity. I think that there's no way to separate, and we have this sort of weird leftover. And I really do think it's like a white guy imperative. Sorry, we're gonna go here real quick in the interview. I thought I was gonna wait to get on my soapbox about this, but we're just gonna go here right now.
I was gonna work up to this.
I was gonna work up to this, but no. I really do think that it's kind of like a leftover old white guy poet being seen as the dominant cultural force narrative, that like the writer has nothing to do with the poem. Like that for me is only a context you can have if you are seen as the cultural standard. Any other person is like, wait, what? No, that is not how this works. So I could be writing about anything and it's always going to be a crippled queer poem. I could be writing about flowers, like whatever. It doesn't matter. The only way to say that like, oh, my identity is separate from the poem is to come from a context where your identity is not questioned and doesn't matter, and is just taken as like white dudes are people and everybody else is whatever they are first.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's preposterous to say that like our identities don't, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like bleed into everything that we write.
I'm really, really happy that you told that story in, I don't know, in chronological order. Because when you said that you quit writing about disability, I was like, no.
Yeah.
Because, well, you said it. You were letting the
Yeah.
audience dictate, and that doesn't take away from it being part of who you are. I mean, maybe you don't want to read it. Maybe you don't want to read it. Maybe you don't want to perform it. Maybe you don't want to give people permission to, you know, say that's all you are. Sure. But I'm very, very grateful that you're not done writing it.
I think what I realized is that like people are gonna take what they're gonna take from it, whether I write about it or not. Like I was not writing about it, and that particular audience member who I was talking about still put all of her weird
It's nice
stuff.
to see someone like you.
Yeah, okay, so like if they're gonna do it regardless, why am I bending over backwards to like not tell the truth? People are just gonna take whatever they're gonna take from it, no matter what. You can't control your audience's response to your work. I do still get audience members who really don't get it, and who really say things that are wildly ableist, and I'm like, okay, you haven't been listening for 20 minutes, but okay. You can't control that. But then there are also people who really feel valued and really feel seen by my work, and my favorite people actually are people who become disabled. I've had a lot of really meaningful interactions with people who get diagnosed with a very serious illness or something, and then come to me and say like, I wouldn't have known that my life was going to continue if you hadn't been, not just from my poetry, but like I never shut up on social media. Like you follow me on Facebook, you know that I'm like, I never shut up on social media. I'm always talking on Facebook about my daily lived experiences as a disabled person. So there are a lot of people who are like, if you hadn't have been talking about this, I would have thought my life was over. Because like the traditional narrative around becoming disabled is that like your life is done, right? Like your life is going to change drastically, and like you as a person internally change drastically. So my favorite interactions are people who are like, I thought my life was going to be done, and I thought I was going to have to become a totally different person, and your work taught me that doesn't necessarily have to be, and that life is still rich and full and full of complexity. Those are my favorite people who have responded to my work. And then there are other disabled people who maybe have never thought that they could write about their experiences, and maybe read my work and are like, oh wow, I could do this too. Like that, that's what I'm about. That's what I realized was more important to me than like the couple of people who come up to me and say some wild nonsense, and you're just like, all right, have a good day. Like I don't know, like
It ain't you.
thank you. And I mean, like that happens even outside of poetic context too. That happens in, I don't know, the grocery store. Like you're always going to get people coming up to you and saying bonkers things, and you're just like, whatever, it's Tuesday, what are you doing? Like I don't know. So you might as well be telling your actual own story, because people are going to be weird to you no matter what. So you might as well, you can't live for those people. And that's what I was doing in my work beforehand, was like living to try and avoid those weird interactions, and they didn't stop. So I might as well just be telling the truth. And you have to duck and weave against those anyway. So
sorry, I was looking for a link to link, because you were hitting on some stuff that was beautiful and relevant to some other things that I was thinking of. And that's very much, which I'm going to give, I think it's called Don't Be a Dick. There's a lot of things in our world titled Don't Be a Dick.
I'm thinking about, there's a quote by the singer Dessa, who I think some of your audience is going to be familiar with. If there are any like queer women in the audience, their ears just perked up like but she has a quote, make good art and don't be a dick. Like that's her. Somebody asked her about like the political obligation of art, and she was just like, I don't know, make good art and don't be a dick. Like that was kind of what she landed on. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff in our realm called entitled Don't
So
Be a Dick.
I've just linked, there's this, there's only 2 issues of this magazine so far, but they have a section called Don't Be a Dick. And in their second issue, it's on ableism. And so I linked that in the chat here if folks want to see like things you maybe didn't think about, like why to not park on those lines in parking lots.
Don't. Oh my God, guys, don't. It's so annoying. That's actually also another interaction that I love a lot is able-bodied people who say to me, like, you're talking about things that I never would have even considered, like things that I never would have even thought about. Like that's always nice too, where it's like, yeah, no, because I don't expect people to understand what they don't understand. You know what I mean? Like I'm never gonna not meet somebody where they are. And if you've never thought about something, it's because you've never had to. And there are things with my identity. I'm a white person. You know, there are a lot of things that I've never had to think about that in the past couple of years I've been like, ooh, yeah, I'm there was a whole world that I was just not because I didn't. There's a lot of like, you don't want to and you don't see it because it's just not part of, you're just not looking. But then there's also just stuff that we all just genuinely don't understand. And that I think it's really important. It can be hard when you're going through your life and you're tired and like you're dealing with this shit every day. It can be hard to meet people where they are and to accept just that level of not understanding. That can be really hard to like deal with. And there are moments where I like super don't want to deal with it. And I respect anybody who's just like, yeah, not my job. But I'm also an educator. I trained to be a creative writing teacher, and that was really what I wanted to do before I got really sick, and I'm kind of too sick to do it now. So I have a little bit more space than other people to like sit with people who don't know stuff and who are like, hey, I never really considered this, or I have some questions, or like what. And again, there are moments where you super don't want to do it, and there are moments where like you just don't have the space to engage in that way. But I always try to meet people where they are and sort of acknowledge, like, yeah, not everybody's gonna know how to go seek out these answers. And if my work can be a part of the seeking out of the answers, that's great. I love that. That's really important to me.
Yeah, I will generally give the advice like maybe try the internet first.
Right. Yeah, I definitely am also kind of a Google is free person,
Mm-hmm.
but I also know that there are people who don't know how to do research. Like I'm a research geek, so like it's very easy for me to like when I see a concept that I don't really understand to know where to go to find those answers, which I don't think I think that's a skill. I don't necessarily I think when we say Google is free, I think there is another side to that, which is like Google also has sponsored results, and you're going to get answers that
Right.
corporations want you to get.
I was totally refraining from saying that, from being like Google's free to an extent.
Google's free to an extent, you know, like I'm always trying to walk the line of like my personal energies and other people's personal energies, and also like understanding that you can't just throw everybody out into the internet who has a complex sociological question and like trust that they're going to get the right information. That, you know, like so if I have a moment to spare where I have the emotional spoons to be like, yeah, great, I'll sit and talk this over with you, especially if it'll keep you from like bothering another person. Like I'm very much like, maybe don't go to your friend of that actual identity to like ask them about this question that you have. Let's you and me sit and have a conversation about this, and like here are some helpful links before you like go and bother someone else. You know what I mean? Or even with my own experience, like I have some links in my back pocket where if somebody's just like, hey, I have a question about blah, 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 I'm like, here's some theory, here's an author who's like written about this very extensively better than I have.
Question, Liv. Here's some theory.
Here's some theory. Yeah, I always have some theory in my back pocket because I love theory.
Yeah, this is something that I think of a lot, that link I talked about a second ago, because it's, I mean, like the don't park on the grid lines and don't stand in the middle of the cut curb. Like never
don't stand at the bottom of a ramp. I'm begging you for your audience. Like if you're having a smoke break or whatever, don't stand at the bottom of the wheelchair ramp, guys. It's like my least favorite thing. Like there are a lot of different examples of this, but like that is my personal one. please don't. Like, it's really, you know,
Excuse me.
there are just little things, and I don't expect anybody to like know this off the bat, but it also, here's the thing about disability that makes it different from other types of identity. You can become disabled in a way that you can't, it's permeable in a way that other identities are a little bit less permeable. You are going to become disabled at some point in your life. And I think ableism is rooted in the fear of death and the fear of aging and the fear of our bodies deteriorating. And like, that's a whole other thing. But if you learn this stuff early, you're going to be more prepped for curveballs in healthcare that are going to happen in your life and in the lives of people that you love. Not even like might happen, but like are going to happen at some point in your life. And I feel like poets, we are always confronting mortality. I think poets we have a different relationship to time and mortality than perhaps other types of humans. Just get ready. And I'm not saying that in like a spooky way. I'm like, you know, I'm saying like it will prep you for living a better quality of life if you start taking into account don't park on the curb cuts and don't park in the middle of the grid line. Like, you know, you're gonna one day you're gonna be thinking about this. Hopefully not until you're in your 90s. Like, I hope that for you. I want your body to work the way it's supposed to work for as long as it possibly can. But if you start reading about this experience and start listening to people who are experiencing this as part of their daily lives, you'll be more prepped for whatever might happen to your body in the future. And you'll realize that it doesn't fundamentally change you as a core person if something happens to your body. You are still you, your life is going to change, the way that you view yourself is going to change, but it's less creepy. It's less like, oh my God, like what do we do? If you've already been thinking about it on a kind of more theoretical basis, and you're learning to be empathetic towards people of my stamp, and we'll help you, you know, like we're here for you. Like, you know, the disabled community will make room for you, and we'll help you get through it. But like, check it out before you start, you know, before it actually happens to you. You can get yourself prepped for a lot of stuff that will eventually happen to you if you start thinking about it.
So you said that you started out writing fiction.
Yes.
When did you come to start thinking about yourself as a writer, like a capital W writer?
Oh my God, always. I'm really fortunate. I've been one of those people who really has always known what they've wanted to do, and has really always been deeply fundamentally supported by the people around her.
Sad when people are like, oh, I don't know, am I real? Like, yes, you are.
Yeah, no, I get the am I real, because I definitely struggle with that every day as a disabled writer. I don't write as much as I want to. You know, there is this weird paradox of like, the thing that you're writing about is actually preventing you from writing as much about the thing that you want to be speaking about as often as you could. So I definitely get the am I real, because I do it every day. You can call my best friend and ask her, you know, there's always some sort of existential crisis happening. But yeah, no, I was really, really supported in wanting to write from the time that I could hold a pen, and even before. Like, I was always interested in story and always telling stories and always making stuff up. And I think that we don't talk enough about how support is key to the people who become artists, the people who pursue artists. I mean, recently on social media, I forget who asked, but one of my friends asked, how many of your families know that you're an artist, and if they know, are they supportive of it? And everybody on the thread except for me said either they don't know, or they know and they don't care.
Heartbreaking.
And it was so upsetting to me. It was like, oh my God. Like, and I mean, to be fair, my family is not reading everything that I write. There are certain things that like, there are certain things where I look at my parents and I'm like, maybe you guys, I have a whole point of view. I have a whole persona poem from the point of view of my vagina. Like, there are certain things that like, you know, whatever. And also what's interesting is my family is like deeply supportive and has absolutely no idea what I actually do, which is kind of funny. Like, they're very proud of me. They have no idea what I'm doing half the time. They have no clue. I had to like sit my dad down and explain to him what a writing residency was the other day, which was like, oh my God, this is so cute. Like, but it upset me so much that so many people are there, the people around them are not supportive of what they're doing. And we have to talk about the economic disparities of that too. Like, we have to have a discussion about how people who get to do this have to have some kind of economic security in doing this. And I come from major financial privilege, and my parents were just like, this is what we want you to be doing. Like, I approached my father at a certain point with like other career options and other things that I thought I could be good at and things that I could do, and he was just like, no, I want you to write. I want you to focus on your writing. And like, that level of support coming from your parents when you're 20, nobody gets that. Nobody gets that kind of support from the people around them, willing to be like, yes, we will go and help you get your MFA. That's bonkers. That's like, I'm a 0.01% chance lightning strike person in that regard. So, but I have always been really, really supported and always really wanted to do this. And I've been really, really lucky in that I've always known that like, this is the thing that I want to be doing. Even in moments when I'm like, am I real? Am I doing enough? Am I working hard enough? I'm not publishing as much as other people. I'm not writing as much as other people. There is always that level of support behind me, even when I'm like, I want to be pushing myself harder and I'm not doing it the way that I want to be doing it.
So
That level of support's huge.
with that in mind, that you're maybe not doing as much as you'd like to. I'm using quotes because I want
Yeah, let's talk about
very
capitalism
careful
for a hot second here.
No, no, not that actually. How do you deal with, the days when maybe you have the inspiration but you don't have the spoons? For folks who don't understand what we're saying when we say spoons, I'll throw a link to spoon theory in the chat, but it is mostly saying out of energy. It's a short.
Yeah. If
So
you
when you
definitely
when you
recommend
don't
reading
have-
spoon theory. Yeah, I mean, I'm working on different ways to cope with that. Part of my disabled experience is massive chronic pain and chronic fatigue, especially related to temperature. So like, if I'm better in warmer climates. I live on the East Coast where it's not warm, and so I am in bed for 6 to 9 months out of every year at this point. And I'm working on getting to a better living situation, but I live with my family because of the social security system is meant to keep people in poverty, blah 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 blah. We won't talk about it, but if anybody has any questions for me about how social security sucks, you can email me and I'll tell you all about it. But yeah, so I'm in debilitating pain and fatigue a good portion of the time, which is why I don't write as much as other people. I definitely am a slow writer. I'm not a write every day kind of gal. I wish I was. I do believe in that as a way to become better. I'm too damn disabled. It's just not going to happen. So this has been kind of a growing experience for me, learning how to cope with that and learning how to not have the emotional side effects of that and feel guilt and shame and comparison and all those things that are really, really beat into us by our capitalistic society. Even as artists, we all feel like we're in competition for very, very scant resources because our culture tells us that art doesn't matter. So we carry a lot of our capitalistic like rise and grind stuff into our art with us, and I'm fully in it. When I figure out how to get out of it, I'll spread the word and tell everybody else. But I think mostly what I try to do is I try to always be thinking about what I'm working on, even if I'm not writing whatever I'm working on. I'm always sort of in the headspace of what I am working on and always trying to keep it working on the kind of subconscious levels of my brain, even if you're always not consciously thinking about it, so that when you have the energy, it's all there. It's all kind of percolating in your brain already. And you can sort of sit down and like have thought this out for weeks or months beforehand, and it's a little bit easier to get to the writing place when you actually have the energy to do it. And also just because if I didn't live in a world of my own imagination, I would probably not be healthy because my body is not doing what I'm telling it to do. So you have to kind of construct other places in your head where it's a little bit happier, and you're not constantly thinking about whatever is going on with your body. But yeah, and then I try to remind myself that like I'm trying to learn, like, who are you when you're not writing? You still have human value even if you're not doing the thing that is the most important thing in the world to you. Like, just because it is the most important thing in the world to me and the core's part of my identity as a writer, I'm really, really trying to separate the other things about me that are important and worthwhile from the actual task of the writing, which is super hard. And again, I'm saying this as somebody who is like deep in the process. Like, I have not figured any of this out yet. My therapist will tell you I'm not here yet, but that is where I am at, and what I'm trying to get to is like your value is not only what you write. And that goes for anybody. That goes for anybody who feels emotionally tied into
Productivity is not
productivity.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm working on that. I'm working on, yeah, you're still a person if you're not writing.
That is another aspect of identity, right? We in the arts are really tied to our artist status. And I say status, and what I mean is identity. So it's especially, I don't know, helpful to me to see someone who is not creating, who is still a creator, right? I'm not that you're not creating, but who cannot create for X amount of time. And that doesn't change the fact that you're an artist. That's really,
and 9 months is so long. Like here's what I would like to say about chronic illness for people who don't know. What nobody tells you is that it's really, really boring. You're gonna be bored so much of the time. It is so boring. It's really boring to be in bed for 9 months. It's really, really, really boring. And especially for someone like me who is constantly needs to be active in her brain. If she's alone with her thoughts for even a minute, like she'll start to freak out. It's really boring. So 9 months is really a long stretch, and I'm already over it by the end of Christmas, and then we've got until March or April to go until I can kind of get up and be a person. So like that's hard. It's a really long stretch. And it really, I need to learn who I am for all of those 9 months, and to learn to be gentle with myself, and to learn, like, if I get up and shower and eat, that's great.
That's okay.
For me. That's great. That's okay. Even like, you said to me, as we were kind of rescheduling this, you said, I've been reading your statuses on, are you okay with going forward? Like, I don't want to drain all of your spoons. I stayed in bed for all of yesterday to prep for this hour that we are talking right now. Like, you have to, the other thing about chronic illness is you also have to make decisions. You have to make decisions on what is going to be important to you. And you only have a limited number of energy bars. For anyone who doesn't really know spoon theory, think of it as like energy bars in a video game. Like, think about it like if you're a gamer. Okay, now imagine everything that you do decreases your life count. It's not just getting hit. It's like if you pick up that object, that is also going to decrease your life count. How would you play that game? How would you make the decisions for what your energy is going to go towards? So that is also a thing too, is like you have to constantly be making decisions about what is going to be important to you. So like that's the other thing too, is like you have to kind of learn that every decision is important. And so even if I get up and make myself food, that takes all day. But that's awesome. That's fine. If I read a page, that's awesome. And again, this is all, I'm saying this like it's easy. It's really hard to get into this mindset, my friends. It's really tough. I'm a person who really wants to work 20 hours a day. I am a recovering capitalist. I really, 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 like, I wanted to be Charlotte Pickles when I was a child. I wanted to be like a woman in a power suit with a cell phone, yelling at people, working in publishing. I wanted to be the Miranda Priestley of Random House books. That's what I wanted. I wanted like job, 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 job. That was what I was really focused on. So to unlearn all of that and to learn that there are days when you're just gonna wake up and take a shower and then take a note for a poem, and that's it. That's really hard. I'm not saying any of this like it's easy, but it is where I'm at, and it's what I'm trying to learn.
I'm grateful too that you said that it's not easy to get into this mindset, because I mean, how do I say this so it's not just about me?
You can make it about you. We can have therapy right now.
But like I think this is also artist brain, right? Where like we already said this, if you're not producing, are you an artist? And like, yeah, you still are, because you are still an artist. Like that's part of your heart and your brain. But like sometimes your brain lies to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Not every thought is true. Just because you think it doesn't actually make it true. And I think that also has to do with artists fighting for cultural legitimacy. I don't think we would necessarily have this productivity problem if like we weren't at a party and the first question that anybody asked about you is like, what do you do? So like, I think that we are constantly trying to fight for the fact that what we do has any kind of value at all. So if you combine that with like, yeah, I'm also living on Social Security and don't work and have to live with my parents because I don't work, and like there's just a lot of different levels of like culturally happening at that point. So I feel like if it weren't for that, I would also have less problems with like I need to be producing all of the time because I'm working in a field that like nobody cares about. The only people who are slightly less cared about culturally are like people who do modern dance or something, and God bless them, they're amazing. I love you if you sing opera or play the cello or do modern dance or whatever, but there are certain things where like you always feel like you're fighting to prove to other people that what you're doing has value, and I'm really trying to kind of get out from underneath that as an artist and as a person, and try to be like, hey, only people are the only creature on this planet that feel like they have to do what they do year round. Every other creature is like, it's cold, I'm going to bed, or like I'm flying south to where it's not cold again, like
we are just animals.
We're just animals. Like every other animal would be like, yeah, super, I'm going to bed for 9 months, and like that's just what they do. So like I had to kind of like work with that and realize that like, yeah, no, you're just operating on kind of your natural cycle, and that's fine. And again, I'm saying this like I have it all under control, and I don't wake up from 4-hour naps covered in guilt and shame. No, that's not what I'm like. I definitely still do, but I'm trying. It's an aspirational process. It's fine.
Raggle, you said something, and it piqued something. Oh yeah, it's really hard to sort of get a handle on the idea that we exist in bodies. I don't know what that's about, but it's true.
It's so hard.
As society, as individuals, it's hard to like remember we exist in bodies. The amazing artist, comic poet, Lauren Haldeman posted a comic recently that was her avatar with a cotton swab up its nose, and it said, this is just a body and I exist in it, or something. And it touched me because that's something that I sort of practice a lot as a human in a body. We see body shaming in the world, and we see like, oh, I was sick and now it's hard for me to walk the route I used to walk, or I told you I sometimes have chronic pain. Like I was in a boot for 2 years, which is not crutches for a lifetime, right? But it changed my life.
Not great, but a boot's hard. A boot's really hard. I wouldn't be able to leave the house in a boot. So like everybody has different levels.
So so, you know, having things that remind you that you have a physical body, even if it's like your foot falling asleep, can be sort of jarring because we so believe that we believe in our head, that we live in our heads. That's actually like writing that I really enjoy is touches on existing in the body
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
existing in the
absolutely.
mind. Or like with
And
actors who act from here up, you know?
oh my God, people who do like face acting to me are baffling. I'm like, how do you
Is
change
this
your
what you're like in real
face?
life?
Like I don't, because I'm one of those people who like I can't control my face. Like you know those people who like
I
I
say I
didn't
wear my
mean,
heart on my face.
it's like I didn't mean to like make that face so loud. Like you know
Yeah.
what when you're keeping the thought inside, but your face is just fully like, what the fuck is wrong with this person? Yeah, no, I am fully like B. Arthur. I can't control my face. I'm sorry, it's just there. But yeah, people who like act with their faces to me are baffling. Like I've done a little bit of acting and it's like it's fine. You can totally like make your body move your limbs and make your body do stuff in certain cases. Not everybody can, but people who are acting in that way do have some control of that. People who act with their face muscles, I'm like, what? That's bonkers. What? It's
But
amazing.
there's a lot of like critique in acting because so many people only act with their face where like your whole body exists. Uh, and that's what I
In
would.
my opinion, those people are just jealous. I don't know. I yeah, I can throw myself on the ground and look prostrate too. I do it 2 or 3 times a day. I can't make myself look a different way than like what is actually going through my head at any given time. So like that to me is just amazing. But yeah, I definitely walked around as a brain in a jar for a lot of my life because in my experience, chronic illness and disability are different things. They are often very entwined things, but I had a pre-chronic illness life and a post-chronic illness life. I've been disabled since birth, but that experience has changed over time. And shout out to my people with cerebral palsy. They told us it's not a degenerative disorder. Fuck doctors, really. I can't begin to tell you the lack of research done on the changing body of the adult with cerebral palsy because we only stopped being institutionalized like 20 years ago. So like, yeah. So I was told that I was going to get to a certain point of physical limitation and then that was going to be where I was at. And it was all going to be, and if we could get me to move through the world at that particular place, then that was what I was going to have to deal with. And that is just not the case. And from the ages of 20 to 30, my body changed so quickly. It was stunning to me what happened to me in 10 years. It was absolutely so jarring to experience all these changes and to suddenly not be able to do half the things that I was able to do as a teenager. And then to have nowhere to go to your medical professionals and have them just be like, like you know, which I mean, I think a lot of people in American healthcare are familiar with the absolute shrugging apathy of doctors.
Well, there's
And like I had
so
really good doctors, I had really wonderful people helping me, and they were just like, I don't know, like I've done my
there's so
job.
many things for which there's just no history to look on, and that's one of them. You
We
know,
just don't have it. So I had to very quickly give up brain in a jar. In the course of maybe a 5-year span, I was like, oh no, you live in a body. Like because I also have very significant ambulatory privilege, which is a thing that we should also discuss. There is a hierarchy of people in the disabled community, and there are people who are listened to, and there are people who are able to access spaces that other people are just not able to access, even within our own community. So we have to talk about that too. But I have ambulatory privilege, and a lot of my approach to accessibility and to moving through the world was like, I don't want to do it, but I can, so I will. It's not easy to walk up this 5-floor walk up to get to this performance space, but like, fine, like whatever, I'll make it work. It's fine. And then you just get to the point where you just can't do that anymore. And it took me a long time to realize, like, actually, you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to be in bed for 2 days because you did this thing and they didn't have an accessible space, and you were just like, yeah, fine, whatever, like I want to do the thing, so I'll just do what I have to do. At first I thought that was my problem and it was not other people's problem. It was just like, okay, you have to figure it out. You need to Google whether or not you can get to the space, and if you can, you have to figure out how you're going to get in. And it took me a long time, and
That's labor too.
That's labor too. And it took me a long time, and it took me the work of other activists to be like, actually, no, you live in a body and you have to listen to your body. And again, I'm saying this like I'm like at the end of this journey. I am deeply not at the end of this journey. And there are days when I do not listen to my body and I don't want to listen to my body. And that goes back to what we were saying before about choices. It's like, yes, I absolutely will stand outside of this concert venue for 8 hours so that I can stand for another 3 in the absolute front of the pit because I have made that choice. And like, that is a thing that I want to do. And I will be in bed for a week afterwards, but I made that call. Like, that goes back to making choices. But I definitely had to learn to not be a brain in a jar in a very, very quick span, and learn that my body is a part of what I'm doing. So that's hard. That's really hard. And if anyone is struggling with that, I feel you and I see you. It's a really hard thing that you're doing.
I think something that's interesting, and I know we're at the end, but I'm not done with you. So
we could do this for hours. This could be a real,
so please tell me when it's like time for me to shut down. But I've been thinking now about like poets I like who, and I'm going specifically with poets because with prose writers, like there's just, it's very different to talk about existing in a body. But there are some poets that can't come to mind really quickly who talk about existing in a body. Like Tara Hardy, when they, I don't know if that's
she, I believe. I think maybe both. I think maybe she and they, but I know. Well, she.
Tara Hardy had cancer and wrote some really, really incredible work about like learning that you are part of a body. There's Andrea Gibson, both with cancer and with gender, has done some really cool work about the physical body. And I'm sure here's another thing that this is where this led from, talking about how there's just no history to look on for some doctors. We don't have, like, queer people haven't gotten very old.
Right.
So there are a lot of queer artists who talk about existing in a body, because of AIDS, but also because of being the first generation of queer people to grow old. Like, that's crazy. But it's a thing, to consider. Like, the aging body also brings people around to this idea that they exist in a body. And the writing on that is really dope. And can be jarring, and that's cool. That's good. Like, we should be moved.
There is also, I think in poetry specifically, because I can only speak for the poetry community really at large, but I think there is an ageism.
And I do speak for the poetry community.
I do. Oh, I will and do. There is definitely a youth-centric culture in poetry that I find a little disconcerting, like as somebody who is over 30, and I like, and this was something I first started thinking about in slam, because I started slamming way later than I wanted to. I wanted to be slamming from the time that I was like 15 or 16, and didn't get to start slamming until I was 27, I believe, and only was able to slam for one season before that community, for various political reasons, kind of disappeared in New York. There's only the Nuyorican Poetry Slam as a venue left in New York. God bless them. I love them. But it shut down a lot of opportunities. And there is a kind of wonderkind culture in slam specifically. There's a lot of opportunities for teenagers. There's a lot of learning opportunities and coaching opportunities for teens, and which is great, which is a whole other culture. But there is also this kind of unspoken thing where if you don't have a book and a full national tour by the time you're 20, you're not doing it. Like, you're just not available. And I was actually really lucky when I the one season that I slammed two of my major influences in slam at that point were older than me and were already burnt out and were like, this is not a thing that you build a career on. You do this for a couple of years and then you sort of move on to other things. This is not the only way to get your work out there. Because I was feeling old. I was 27 in my first season and there were all these kids, like literal children, literal 16-year-olds who are amazing, but who also I worry that if by the time you get to 20, you're like, okay, I'm like done with my work and I published 3 books and like what I worry about the kind of churning out of culture for that. And then when I moved away from that and I got into sort of the very little that I work in publishing, the kind of little toe that I have dipped in publishing, there's very limited opportunities for people who are over 30. There's a really different conversation around kind of the learning opportunities and the teaching opportunities that we give poets who are starting later in life. And that's down to everything from like grants to anything. It's all kind of focused on like your first book and your first this and your first, and it's like, there are people who don't even realize that they want to do this until extremely late in their lives. There are people who don't even like discover this until they're your life. You don't even have like experiences to write about really before you're, I don't know, 40. What do you know? So as I'm approaching,
I've become that really annoying old person who's like, no, you don't understand how young you are.
Oh my God, I've become that person too, because my embarrassing admission is that I'm on Tumblr, and Tumblr is terrifying. Tumblr is really super youth oriented, and you're just like, oh my God, you don't know. I'm always kind of walking this line between like always wanting to be open to the ideas of the young and open to the criticisms of the young.
Absolutely.
Because I think that's really important, and also being like, nobody under 24 talk to me because you have absolutely no idea what the hell you're talking about. Like it's so hard, because then they'll just come out with this stuff and you're just like, you have
that's
no
a lack of
idea.
experience you're speaking from.
Like, and also because like you're living on the internet, you've never actually even been to a gay bar, and you're telling me how to identify myself linguistically. What is what? Like, so I'm always constantly walking that line between like not wanting to be like a boomer and like not wanting to totally shut off from the criticisms that young people are actually like lobbying just because they're young people. And then they kind of say things where I'm just like, that is the absolute contextless, dumbest Twitter thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, what are you doing? So yeah, like that poetry is, I feel a little bit like that too. I think there's a real missed opportunity to like bring people at various stages in their life together, and this sense that like when you haven't, I'm still doing battle with my first book and I'm 33, and there's a lot of shame and guilt around that too, and like I haven't published a book yet and I'm 33, and like there's just all this mess around it, and I'm forgetting the question, but like yeah, I think that also comes with like living in a body too. We're afraid of growing old, and we're afraid of aging, and we're, you know, so I'm kind of one of the first generation of disabled people to grow old, but I'm also one of the first queer people to grow old, and it's a lot, but it's also like, I think the internet really divides the generations, you know, in ways that are counterproductive. Like, I do want to learn from you, and I do want you to learn from me, but I also, there are a lot of opinions just floating around where I'm just like, oh my God, what? You have no context. You are without context in any way. So yeah, that's also part of living in a body. You're also living in an aging body, and that's rough. That's a rough gig.
Well, if you're down, I would love to continue this some other time.
Yes, part 2. Yes,
I mean,
yes, absolutely.
I'd love to continue it now too, but now I'm gonna have to start thinking about the rest of my day.
I also feel like we have not discussed poetry really at all in this interview, and I'm very sorry for anyone here who was like here for like writing tips and tricks, and it's like, I'm still writing my first book. I don't know if I necessarily have a whole lot of advice, but I am a freelance editor, so if you know, if you want kind of more tips and tricks from me, if anyone is free to reach out to me on social media or to email me. I do have a lot of kind of technical poetry stuff that I can talk to you about. I feel like we didn't do any of
What,
that.
What's your email address? I'll throw that in the chat.
So my email address is Olivia Mammone, all one word, @gmail.com. And you are free if you have anything that you want to ask me, or if you have work that you'd like to share with me. It is winter, so I am in kind of my hibernation stage, and I'm like not working as hard as I would be because of all of the things that we've discussed in this interview. You can also find me on Instagram @Mammone _Liv. I'm not on Twitter because Twitter is an absolute nightmare, so I can't be on Twitter. But yeah, if anyone wants to reach out to me about like actual technical things about poetry that I don't think that we talked about a lot in this interview, and if you also want other poets we've only mentioned a few people here. Tara Hardy is incredible. And a huge inspiration to me. But if anybody wants the names of other disabled writers and people who write about some of the stuff that we have discussed in this episode, more than I do, because I don't write and publish a whole heck of a lot, I will be happy to like lean you towards anyone who you think would be able to help you in your journey if any of this has resonated with you at all.
That's so wonderful. Thank you. So I'm going to give a prompt. I'm not going to make anyone stay. I'm going to give updates, then I'm going to give a prompt. But I'm not going to make anyone stay on hand for that prompt. But I do hope that you'll set yourself a 5-minute timer and do it on your own. So fun stuff coming up in the Midwest Writing Center. This Saturday, we have what will be a hybrid and very, very limited space for this final in-person event for a while. That will be at Sunrise Galleries in Muscatine. It'll be a reading from These Interesting Times, the anthology that just came out from Dropping Things Press, from Midwest Writing Center Press. That'll be a really, really beautiful space. That'll be a fun experience. We are still, until the end of the month, accepting submissions to the Foster Stall Chatbook series. All that information is on our website, mwcqc.org. We also have information on, of course, we have all the guidelines for submission, but we also have information on what a chapbook is for those who maybe not so familiar. Okay, I didn't normally.
Can I give an update because of one thing, everybody. Zooglossia, which was mentioned in my bio, Zooglossia is a writing residency for disabled writers, and that is defined very loosely. So if you think that you might fit that category, you do, I promise. We are currently online. This residency for 2022 will be online because of, obviously, but we are accepting applications right now. So if anybody, if the writing about the body is of interest to anybody, you can fill out an application and maybe become one of our fellows for 2022. It's a really incredible space. You'll meet a lot of really amazing writers, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they have on the program for it this year. Just as we're talking about other things that you can submit to right now, you can also submit to that if that is something that you're interested in.
Thank you so much. Other updates. Iron Pen is back. Of course it is. It always is. Every year we do a 24-hour writing contest. So you can register now. That will happen the third weekend of February. I usually bring my calendar into my Write More Light moments so that I don't have to think of this off the top of my head. I want to say it's the 25th, 26th of February, but again, third weekend. All the real information is on our website and elsewhere on social media. So that'll be a really great one. That is locals only. So you have to be in the Midwest for that one. And winners of that are going to be offered publication in the writer's block. There's a word for it, our online literary magazine from the Midwest Writing Center. Then also, this is really, really exciting for women and femmes. We're having a 6-week workshop with Tanea Winder, a truly amazing speaker and poet. And that will be on the heart work of writing. So the work that happens within the self, the emotional journey of writing. It's going to be generative. It's going to be really beautiful. Tanea Winder is such a such an amazing speaker, an amazing writer, an amazing teacher. That'll be an online workshop too. That's once a week. It's not like 6 straight weeks of labor. And I'm gonna leave it at that. So that's our updates. Now for your writing prompt, I would like you to do some writing on what it means to exist in a body. As always, thank you so much for hanging out, and please write more light into your life. Thank you, Liv.
Thank you. This was amazing. Thanks for this incredible opportunity. And also I love you. And we didn't get to talk about how we're awesome friends, and I love you so much.
Mwah.